Class, and we're almost at the end of the semester. This is the presentation on understanding the final examination. You'll want to watch this all the way through, possibly with the study guide in front of you, as it will take you step by step about what you can expect on the final exam. Students get nervous about final exams, but this one is really not one to be too nervous about. You're going to find out it's open book. It's not that it's easy, but it does ask you to apply what you've learned rather than remember obscure little facts like are on some tests. So, first of all, some of the logistics about the exam. It's going to be released on the Blackboard course shell on Monday, May 6th. And you have most of that week to take it. It's going to be due no later than midnight on Sunday, May 12th. Now, the important thing to remember here is that you cannot take the final exam late. So if you miss it, you miss it. And part of that is because that's the close of the grading period or the close of the semester, and then there are a limited number of days for professors to get their grades in. So what do? You take the exam, you go into the course shell and go to the assignments folder like you've been doing throughout the course. And you're going to see a final exam folder. You're going to open that up. And in that final exam folder, you're going to find several things. One is the study guide. And then after May 6th, the link for the submission to take the exam will become available. You can't see it right now probably because it's not May 6th yet. It's probably not May 6th. It may be when you're doing this, but if it's before May 6th, you can't see the link. You need to set aside 2 hours. It's a timed exam and it takes you in and then it stops after 2 hours, and you have to take it in one sitting. So you can't shut it down and come back. So be sure to take it when you've had your drink of water and you've done whatever you need to do and you're ready to focus on it for 2 hours. If you have a documented accommodation that you have sent in, it will be honored. So a couple of you have time and a half, for example, but do me a favor, please, and send me an email reminder. I'll try to remember, but it just helps if you, because I have to set up a special time for your particular exam. You can use anything you want, PowerPoint materials, slides, the textbook, you can use lectures, anything you want, but there's one cardinal rule, and that's that you've got to do it on your own. You may not work with another person. So how should you prepare? Well, really 4 steps. We're going to read the specific information below. It's a good idea to go and reread the summaries at the end of each chapter of the text. You can go back and view the PowerPoints if you're particularly weak on an area. You could look at the PowerPoint lectures. And then the most important thing is to go to the bullets in the study guide. We're going to go through them below and see how many you could do. And you could even prepare notes that you could use while you take the exams. So the questions will mostly ask you to apply knowledge. So don't concentrate on memorizing information. Instead, you should try to understand the information. So for example, a typical question might ask, discuss 3 classroom management strategies and how you might apply them to improve instruction. So if you think about that, to do that, you first must understand what the strategies are and understand how to use them. And I always tell students this, do not make the mistake of thinking that because the exam is open book, you will not need to prepare. You will need an understanding of specific content in order to finish the exam on time and do well. So for example, in the question above, if you have to stop and look up the classroom strategies and read about what they are before you write your answer, you're going to have trouble finishing the exam. But if you have sort of have them in your mind, know what they are, you should have no trouble finishing the exam. As for the format of the final exam, there are 20 multiple choice questions, 10 true false, 10 matching, 3 short answers, 1 essay, and an extra credit that's up to 5 points. The rest of the study guide focuses on what you should prepare for in the test. And it presents the material chapter by chapter. So we've covered a lot in this course. And these things, if you go through each chapter and look at the vocabulary and understand the answers to the questions, you should do quite well on the exam. Some students find it helpful to spend some time researching the answers to the questions and looking at the vocabulary, writing down any words they're still not clear on, and they can use this as a reference during the final exam itself. So chapter 1 was all about what makes a good teacher. You can see this is the vocabulary straight out of your textbook and out of the syllabus. Why is it important to study educational psychology? What does it mean to teach with intentionality, and why is it important? This was covered in the lecture and also in the textbook. Chapter 2 was all about Piaget and Vygotsky and the zone of proximal development. And so you can see the vocabulary there. Questions: what is the nature versus nurture controversy, and how does it inform education? What are Jean Piaget's stages of development, and how can you apply them to the classroom? What is Len Vygotsky's theory of development, and how can you apply it to the classroom? Also, the zone of proximal development, and why is it important to classroom teaching? What is Yuri Bronfenbrenner's theory of cognitive development, and how can you apply it to the classroom? Chapter 3 in week 4 was all about social, moral, and emotional development. This is when we did the trolley problem, you may recall. So it's about Kohlberg's stages of moral reasoning and Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. We also talked a bit about some specific social and emotional problems associated with adolescence and what were some strategies for dealing with them. Chapter 4, week 5, was about student diversity. We talked about the importance of understanding students' culture, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, race, and what the differences between those were. We talked about underrepresented groups and bias, stereotype. So what is the impact of SES on learning? What are some problems that might occur with lower SES students? How does stereotype, threat, and implicit bias discourage learning? And what are some strategies you might use to discourage stereotype, threat, and implicit bias in your teaching and in the classroom? Chapter 5 in week 6 was all about the behavioral theories of learning. This was Skinner and Pavlov with their classical and operant conditioning. Questions were: what do educational psychologists say that learning is? Could you apply this definition to an example to determine if learning is taking place? What's the difference between operant and classical conditioning? Remember Pavlov's famous dog experiment with the salivating to the bell? What did he do in terms of classical conditioning? What is B.F. Skinner's learning theory, and how may it be applied in the classroom? This is about punishment and reward, shaping students' behaviors. Chapter 5 was all about the social theories of learning. This was week 7. This is Bandura. Bandura's social cognitive theory. What did it state, and how might you apply it in the classroom? This is that students learn by observing others. And so this is about modeling and cooperative group work, etc. Chapter 6 was about brain research, information processing, and cognitive theories of learning. This was week 8. What does information processing research tell us about learning? What are some common myths that classroom teachers hold about brain research? This was the quiz you did where you only use 10% of your brain. That's a myth. What are 2 implications of brain research for the classroom, and how might you use metacognitive techniques to help students learn? Chapter 7 was about direct instruction, called the effective lesson. How would you use direct instruction? Could you design a lesson using direct instruction? This is what you did on one of your discussion posts. What are the best practices regarding questioning strategies? For example, how long should you wait before calling on a student? And how much you use talk moves to promote classroom discussion. Chapter 8 was about constructivist learning. So this was how would you use it? How would you design a constructivist lesson? And what are some things you must consider when using cooperative learning in the classroom? Chapter 9 was about grouping, differentiation, and technology. This is the one that you did not too long ago, where you had to design a lesson plan and differentiate it for struggling learners and advanced students. Understand the difference between differentiating by content, process, and product. Chapter 10, week 12, was about motivational theories. So we talked about Maslow. How does Maslow's hierarchy of needs relate to students' motivation? This is, remember the pyramid, where students have to have their safety needs filled before they move to higher level needs. What are attribution theory and expectancy theory and how much you apply them in your classroom? How does a student's locus of control, remember the internal versus external, influence his or her motivation? What is a mastery goal mindset and how do we want to encourage this in our students? How do we do that? And what are some strategies you may use in the classroom to increase students' motivation? Chapter 11 was entitled The Effective Learning Environments. This is about maximizing teaching or allocated time. What are some principles that guide the setting of classroom rules? What is the principle of least intervention and how might you apply it in the classroom? This is about starting small with nonverbal and verbal reminders before you bring out the big weapons and do something more drastic to redirect misbehavior. How might we structure our classroom to increase time on task? This is about organizing your classroom so that, for example, transitions are done smoothly. What are some common behavior management techniques you could apply in the classroom, such as group alerting, nonverbal cues, and more? So this was about behavior and classroom management. So that's the content. You know now how to get started. This week is purposefully light to give you time to prepare. For next steps, you should email me with any questions and then take the Understanding the Final Exam quiz in this week's folder, which is worth 2 points. You can take that, you can retake that as many times as you want to get a perfect score if you want. And of course, study. Then next week, take the exam in one sitting from May 6th to May 12th. All right, so everybody just relax and take a deep breath, and I'm sure you do quite well. Enjoy the week.